Okay, welcome to the Wednesday afternoon meeting. Two of us in person. I see Commissioner Mortensen's online, so we're continuing with our budget workshops, and up front I see Health and Human Services.
Yep, this is our fourth budget workshop. Kathy Funk Baxter, Finance Director, and our last session for the departmental budgets. And so we have Health and Human Services here.
What tab should we go to?
Oh, we should be on tab 12.
12, okay.
And I am Carol Harrison, Director of Health and Human Services. And usually we only come to these if we have substantial changes or additions or subtractions, and we're kind of status quo this year. So I do have a few notable items I can mention in relation to our budget. So I'll tell you, I think
They have that and they have your narrative.
okay, cool. So I know that Kathy provided kind of a high level overview on a page like this to you that shows the Health Department, Human Services, and Veterans Relief. So we do have 4 additional funds that are under our department, and that would be the, I don't even know if you have those in your binders, but one of them is the opioid settlement funding that has been transitioned over to us to manage on your behalf and administer. So that one is in addition to our budget, as well as we also manage the homeless housing, which is, I think, Fund 18401, which is not included in this one-page overview. And then 14102, which is where we have our let's see, 14102 and 14101, which we have 1/10 of 1%, the DD and CJTA funding. So it's primarily the programs that we contract out to providers. So those are also in another fund that aren't listed on here. So just wanted to bring that up, but other than that, so again, if you look at addition to us this year is the opioid funding. So that is 19301. So we just, that's obviously probably not a lot going to happen this year with that one, but there is a budget for that. There's a small amount in there for us to administer it. And as well as we put a little bit in the advertising in case the board chooses to go out for an RFP or something. So pretty small potatoes there.
Correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I think most of their budget, what they projected, is that like the contract we approved on Tuesday.
Correct.
So those things come in and they're.
And we don't have a ton of control over a lot of those things.
Right.
Yeah.
And
So we're
I
at the
guess what
mercy
I'm
of that.
pointing out, because it's been pointed out before that we don't always spend all those funds. And when we look at, you look back in 21, what was in actual, and you can verify that we don't always spend those things.
Absolutely.
So,
And when we do these budgets for those particular funds that go out to providers, we are, when we're doing it 2 years, a year or two in advance, it's very much a guess, a high level guess based on what we've seen historically. And then we go through and amend the budget as needed throughout that 2-year biennium too. So
we don't have a ton of really, best way to put it, input or control on what comes in.
correct.
Really the function that we look at here is making sure we're spending it wisely type thing, right?
Absolutely.
Is that
And when
where-
we bring those individual contracts forward, we usually recap, what we haven't spent and what's being sent back and that type of thing. Yeah. So another one is, talking about 1/10, when we did the budget, we assumed that you were going to allow the sales tax to sunset. And then we can go back and amend that budget after the fact if the tax is continued or not. We just had to make an
Gotcha.
That's
assumption
the
when we did it.
mental health tax.
Yeah. So we just made an assumption, and obviously that can change depending on how the board votes on that.
Gotcha.
Mhm. Let's see. Another piece that could change this is we have an RFQ out for health officer services. We assumed that we just tagged in what we spent this last couple years for services from Clark County, but that could change based on what that contract or how that looks for the board once the decision is made for who to have start as a health officer in January.
Yeah, that RFP is still out or
It is due this Friday.
is due this Friday.
Yes.
So, yeah, okay.
So we'll be coming back with that soon. Yeah. Kind of on that overview, we mentioned, we're not asking for any additional FTE, not asking for any additional IT or vehicles or anything like that. That's all very status quo for us. Another notable item is veterans relief. This year it looks a little different. We plugged in $100,000 for expenditures in case the board decides to do an RFP or some special projects. We've had that decision quite a bit with the board about what that looks like, because we do have that growing fund balance and we want to make sure that, we
Yeah, we came up with that because the fund balance has been growing.
correct.
I think we all were pretty solid in the fact that it needs to go to veterans, so.
Mhm.
kind of-
Yeah, so we went ahead and plugged some professional services
Yeah.
in there, assuming that we may or may not go out for some type of a, proposals or whatever that looks like, but
Yeah.
we'll have some more conversations about that in the future. We just kind of put that in as a placeholder for an expenditure. Another big item is, so when you look at the one-page overview that Kathy did and you see the health department, it looks like from what it shows that the health department budget is significantly higher for 2024 and 2025. It's a very deceiving number. So you'll see that it shows 2024 budget for health is like 4.1 million and 4.2 million respectively for 2024 and 25 compared to the 3.7 in 2023. So that giant chunk of money that we get from the state, that $1.4 million that came in, we've been working with the auditor's office this year about how we reflect the money when we pay it back. So we actually receive that money twice in 2 lump sums. So we receive the money before we spend it. And then at the end, when we don't spend it, we have to pay it back. So the only way that we could reflect that is by showing it as if it's an expense under professional services. That's the way the auditor's office advised we reflect it. So it's distorts our budget. And I just wanted to highlight that it's probably, going to knock about $700,000 or so off unless we, the board has us start spending that money or something along that lines differently than what we are. But currently we are not approved to spend the full $1.4 million.
Well, the numbers still don't quite add up to what is on the succeeding sheets.
Well, and
So-
I
so
think there was
health-
also some
Health
issues with,
administration is that bumps up to 6.2 mil.
so I think we ran into some issues with what's in the database compared to what was originally inputted. I think something changed in there and we have to
Yeah.
work through that.
Yeah, so we've noted a couple of changes that are going to be needing to be made on the next phase of the budget because of data entry errors. But our numbers are without fund balance, and the budget boss numbers include the fund balance in that total line at the bottom of each fund. Is that what you're looking at?
Sure.
It's really hard to
Hasn't that
follow
been
in
consistent all the way
case-
through the other departments though?
Yes, that
Mhm.
we've been consistent on the summary sheets. We're just showing true expenditures, total expenditures with no regard for the fund balance.
So I guess I would ask that you always include the fund balance. At one
Okay.
time, we had a department that had 100% fund balance.
Hmm,
Stunning. It was the road fund. And they were collecting all that tax and not spending it. So,
So-
I think we need to be aware of
Yeah.
departments
So
that are
how-
just accumulating stuff because we work for the taxpayers and I don't think they like us to save their money for them. If we're
Right.
not going to use the money, give it back to them. We found a use for it. That's when we shifted money. And darned if the department didn't start spending more. Now, there's a very good reason why they need a good, healthy fund balance because of those emergencies. It's
Mhm.
very hard to budget those in. And I think we all agreed on about 60%, and that's kind of what they're maintaining now. But when it was at 100%, that was over the top. And it would be for just about anything else. Same rationale for that Veterans Fund.
Yeah,
Our
you
job
know-
isn't to be saving $1 million that is supposed to go to veterans.
Yeah.
I mean, we need to be resolving that. And we gave instructions earlier this year to the Veteran Services Organization. Where are we missing the ball?
Yeah.
And come up
Um,
with some other
How about
expenditures.
how about a friendly amendment? How about if I show 2 lines on the summary? One is true expenditures
Hmm.
and one is fund balance.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that's an accurate picture.
Yeah.
Yeah. Otherwise, we're flipping back and forth and trying to,
Yeah.
heaven
I
forbid,
agree.
trying to do math in a public meeting. That's
And
that's
these,
always
the
dangerous.
budget boss reports break it down by bars. And I know you guys have had this
Yeah.
conversation for the last couple of weeks. It makes it really overwhelming when you
Yeah.
open those up.
That's why I just put one summary line for each fund as far as total expenses without regard to bars. And so I'll add the fund balance
Great.
so that you have both numbers there so you
Thank
can
you.
see it.
Thank you.
A question? For
Yes.
the year 23, you said without fund balance or anything, it's 3.7 million. And then it goes to 4.1 and 4.2, 24 and 25 respectively. And then you offered an explanation and I don't understand the explanation.
Okay.
Expenditure is expenditure.
You bet. So if you recall in the consolidated contract for the last couple of years, the health department's been receiving what they call foundational public health services funding.
Mhm.
And it was to the tune of like $1.4 million this time around. We only have 3 FTE plus some other expenses that we're covering with that. So we won't be utilizing all of that money. That usually that's not a problem because it's just in the contract. That particular funding, they actually give us the money up front and it gets deposited into our bank account. So we have to pay it back at the end of the state fiscal year. So we had to reflect the payback as an actual expenditure. And that was based on guidance that we received from the auditor's office. So if you take away $700,000 or so from those expenditures that you see of the 4.1 and the 4.2, it gives you a better picture of what our actual budgeted expenditures are.
And the underspending as a result of decisions we made not to hire certain
Correct.
staff to implement
Right.
programs.
Yes.
Right, okay.
If I
Yeah.
take these 700 off 4.1, I get 3.4. And so you're actually reducing, or that's part of the comment that Commissioner Weber mentioned, things don't quite add up yet. I'm patient. If you just say, Aaron, be patient, I'm good as long as it seems droll to me. At this point, I would hope things would not be quite so droll, but I can accept it.
Yeah, and this, unfortunately, in this particular instance with that 700 or so 100,000, we have to reflect it as if it's a professional services that we're spending out when we refund it back to the state. It's a very odd way of reflecting it. You would think we would subtract it from our revenue, but we have to subtract, we have to subtract it. We have to put it like it's an expenditure on the expenditure side.
Well,
We're
I
hoping
can
it can work with the
understand
auditors
showing it
on
as an
something
expenditure. I don't think it's honest to call it professional services because no services are provided.
Well, and that was
and
where we
that's-
were instructed to
I
put
don't
it. So we're
that's-
hoping maybe before the next budget cycle or even in an amendment, maybe we can find a better solution for that in the future because it's very misleading.
With all the bars numbers, there's got to be a better
You would think.
category.
That's
So,
our hope.
so we take the 700 out of the 4.1.
Mhm.
Do we do that out of the 4.2 for 25?
Yes, correct,
So both years are gonna be giving back 700
correct,
each.
correct.
Unless
Unless the. board approves
theoretically,
it.
the Board of Health recommends
Correct.
spending some money in certain categories that qualify for
Exactly,
foundational support.
exactly.
Well, I wouldn't say, well, unless the Board of Health and the BOCC and or the BOCC, right?
Yeah, of course.
Yes,
Yeah. So most of the state stuff is reimbursement type stuff. This one, they just chose
just
to
write you a check.
give it. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
pretty
So
crazy.
calls for different accounting
Yeah.
of it. Yeah.
And then one other item that isn't reflected anywhere is we do have one FTE that is included in the budget as we created it and started the budget process in June. And we had an environmental health specialist resign and move on to a different county in the middle of July. And we've done a lot of analysis and decided not to fill that position. So we'll be working with Kathy to take that position out. So that will change the picture slightly as well.
So difference between 24 and 25 seems not believable in a straightforward way. So there must be an explanation. See, that's a very small increase.
I think there's probably a lot of factors involved there. I would say that until 23, 24, 25, we were probably utilizing, so one example would be Shannon Hoskins. During the COVID times, we were using her a lot more to do more data analysis, and that has decreased quite a bit. So that would be a decrease. I think we saw lots of small decreases that offset a lot of that. So
Well, that's
probably-
appreciated. Don't let me discourage you.
Mhm. Absolutely. And we do that a lot. There's several different things that I think we've done in the last couple of years to try to just keep trimming that down a little bit when we can.
So I did also have a question about FTEs. And I don't think you covered it, but you're down over 6 FTEs from the budget.
Sure.
Is that explained by all those programs that were funded but weren't spent?
3 of them are explained in there. There was 3 foundational public health services positions that are no longer in there. We also had an environmental health specialist position. Let's see, I'm gonna make sure I get this right. Gina and I have gone back and forth over this several times to make sure we get it right. We had another environmental health specialist leave early this year, and we chose not to fill that position. So that has been removed, and we didn't fill the human services manager position that Gina originally had. So that also has been eliminated. That was reflected in prior budgets. So that's what a lot of that is.
Okay, thank you.
I'm happy to answer other questions, or if you have specific questions that, housing and homeless, Gina's your girl.
The complete budget still awaits final negotiations, right? With the union?
Yes, we have our Health and Human Services is unique in that it's not unique, but we are one of the departments that have 2 unions. So, and both of them are currently in negotiations. So that could also affect bottom line.
I think
All right.
I don't have any other questions. I think it's pretty straightforward.
Awesome. Well, thank you.
Thanks.
The only other comment that I have is kind of in general, it's the bulk of the health department's budget is determined by the state of Washington. Just
Yeah.
because we're, the reductions have been made by us, but we continue to spend money on what the state decides is in our best interest rather than us.
That's correct.
Maybe that will change.
Okay. Juvenile? That's what I see next.
you hear me there? All right. Yep, all right. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Judge Basher, Superior Court presiding. I'll be presenting on behalf of both juvenile and detention as well as the Superior Court and Drug Court. My first question, I guess, would be, we're not asking for a whole lot of changes. So does the board have any questions about our submissions?
We just got them at the beginning of this meeting, so I haven't really looked at them.
Well, we're not asking any significant changes. There may be some cost of living having to do with salaries, but that's not on today's budget or today's discussion agenda, I'm told.
So you do show a reduction of 3 FTEs.
I'm sorry,
There is a reduction of 3 FTEs.
for,
It figures. It looks like in juvenile detention.
I'm not prepared to even talk about that. We're not here to talk about personnel, I was told, Commissioner. So maybe are we? Okay, we got to,
That you're looking at the difference between the 22 budget and the 23 budget.
Mhm.
And I
Yeah.
don't have the information on that. But for the 24 and 25 budget, we're right now, as far as I know, it's 26.5 FTEs. So there's no change, like he's saying,
No change from 23.
23 to 24,
There was a
25.
change between 22 and 23.
Yeah. And I don't know what that was.
Those are just positions that weren't filled.
Yes, that's correct, Commissioner.
Okay. I know we've been over there for a couple of retirements, so
Yeah.
that makes
We're,
sense.
we're probably like any other department in terms of, especially like the jail. We're no different than jail in terms of trying to get quality staff, and they're going through different channels, and we criticize every channel at every step. Polygraphs being one of them, psych evals being another. So it's very hard to get a lot of applicants that will go through the entire process and then at the very end get offered a position. So we're struggling there.
It's one of those interesting challenges we have when we know that the number of detainees we take care of overnight has dwindled.
Yeah.
And we're even at 26 and a half, it seems overstaffed, but it's a situation where it has to be open 24/7, and that requires a certain amount of
That is correct,
bodies.
and and it's based on what it is, and which is a 24/7 facility, and we have 4 different shifts. Well, 3 different shifts that we need to fill.
and then, of course, administration.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. I guess a notable change I could point out in regards to that, and you can see in our budget, obviously, there's a savings in salaries, wages, in terms of, having those vacant positions. But on the opposite end of that, you do see our overtime increase, and sometimes it's not good overtime, it's forced overtime. And so all the extra overtime does have an effect. So on the one side, you'll see there's a savings because we have the 4 vacant positions, at least for detention. On the opposite end of that, you do see an increase in overtime as a result.
As you can imagine, you're not the only department that has experienced the difficulty filling positions, and we discovered yesterday that law students have access to loan forgiveness for college loans after 10 years of public service. I don't know if the vacant positions you're trying to fill are degreed requirements, and if that's also another possibility, but if the law allows that, that might be something to be reminding people of that. But they would get that anywhere they go.
If it
so.
applies, we'll advertise it. Whatever we can do to entice people.
I think that applies to any government or nonprofit position.
Mhm.
So,
I would think it would be, just pointing it out might be helpful, but
yeah,
like I said, we're not the only place that allows that, so.
yeah, and I can tell you, one of the one of the things that we're actually using a juvenile employee to do some Superior Court budget management because we can't hire people for Superior Court. So one of our staff that went to juvenile is doing some overtime to help us out with some of our budget management pieces. So.
I know from time to time, I've talked with Judge Basher, Judge Hahn, to some extent George, but not so much, about trying to see if we can do a better job overall. And I know we're subject to the laws, but we've talked about, certainly Judge Hahn would like a respite facility and so forth. And we've got the demands going for youth facilities, some kind. Is there a team that you folks are involved with? Is there something like that in some of the time that can be used?
I believe that Judge Hahn is still involved in that mental health facility siting group. I don't know the status of that. She's been the spearhead of that. Are you aware of that, George?
I am part of that committee. It is Judge Hahn who's spearheading that committee, and we are looking into different avenues to see, what we can do. The biggest obstacle and hurdle that we encounter is that we need to have an agency in our community to spearhead that and be responsible for that, because obviously the courts and juvenile cannot have its own business in terms of, for example, if we were trying to get a crisis residential center, then we wouldn't be the ones actually running that. Or if we were doing a mental health bed facility, then we need to have a mental health agency who's insured and contracted and can do that. So that's one of the obstacles.
So there was an article in the Daily News recently about $1 million grant that Columbia Wellness received from the state for finishing their residential facility. So I hope help is on the way. I don't know if that would be for juveniles or whether it's for adults, and I don't know whether it's for folks who have a need for competency hearings and restoration in order to complete the judicial process.
Yeah.
But
It's
that might be an agency that could. There are a number of agencies locally that could fill that role. CIHS is another one that provides mental health services and gets grants all the time. So there's some opportunities, I think, but sorry, Aaron.
No, that's fine. So, I mean, there's a big topic. I'm fond of the idea of giving kids some real world experience on a farm kind of thing. And, but that's another discussion for here. I just wanted to know if you go into the private world, the R&D group often should get 5% of the budget or 10% of the budget. For new products or new ways of taking a look at things. I wonder, do we do anything like that in a situation here where I think everybody is relatively unhappy with how expensive we are and how we don't seem to help much, which takes me to the point of data collection is always something that we're hitting you on, and I'm hoping that there's effort in the budget there that pays attention to that.
I do know that some of the programs that we have historically run through juvenile are grant-based through the state. Some of those programs are not around anymore. George has, I think, some more details on that, but we're open to looking at ideas for how to help kids, obviously. But we have to look at what programs are available at this point.
Yeah, I think George hit it on the nose. We've got to identify some method to go about it, and yeah.
So Commissioner, the suggestions you make presuppose a change in the state law that requires us, because of our population, to have juvenile center 24/7.
No, I didn't mean it like that, because I know that's a long reach, and we've talked about that in open meeting also.
Well, the thing that I was bringing up is that this is the time we should also be developing a legislative priority list to share with our legislators. And I know that I still haven't heard back from the commissioner I know up in Lewis County on that subject, and I know you made a contact too. So I don't know if they're willing to join us in a regional facility, but all the developments that we're talking about are contingent upon us getting out from underneath that requirement. If we can send kids elsewhere, or if we can accept kids and be the regional facility.
That's one where I'm scratching my head and wondering whether what you're saying is necessarily so. Because we could use some, I say this very, very carefully because Kathy's there and she'd hit me if she could reach over. They did funding for something that we thought was especially useful and beneficial. We try and figure out funding for it. So I picture that you can't abandon what we've got, but if you start a pilot program, it's not unlike what was started with, pardon me if I misuse this, drug court, where folks were trying to do a better thing there. And we paid extra on that. And I don't know what it is here, but I know it needs a champion, and something that George identified, we need a champion.
All I have.
Anything else?
I don't think we really have any additional to present, where our budget really is a flat budget. We're not requesting any changes in our programs or personnel. And the personnel's a different day, but so we're really not asking a whole lot on either detention or probation. So unless you have specific questions, I don't know that we have a whole lot more there.
Well,
Could you give me the numbers for 24 and 25, Kathy?
Okay. For probation,
Yeah,
they're going from a 23 budget of 2.4 million or 45,000 to, for 24, 2.413,000, and 2025, 2.468,000 million.
Yeah.
So,
so essentially flat on probation.
right. And then
And-
for
yeah.
detention, the 23 budget is 2,896,000 basically. For 2024, it's 2,809,000. And for 25, it's 2,871,000.
For that part, I remember a lower number, 2022 and 23 are substantially lower, or just I remember badly.
So for 22, the budget was 2.867.
Okay, I remember badly. Okay, thank you.
But their expenditures have traditionally come in under budget, as they mentioned, primarily, I think, because of personnel, vacant positions. So for detention, it was 2.867,000, and they actually spent 2.493,000. So, and on probation, it's a little bit higher of a discrepancy between budget and expenditures. They budgeted 2.347,000, and they spent 1,895,000. So quite a bit of difference there.
So how, that always begs the question, how do we do how were you able to do your job then?
Commissioner, I can explain a little bit in terms of this discrepancy there. So and if you're looking at the year, and that's, what is that, 2022?
22.
Tail end of COVID. What we, in the juvenile world, we receive a lot of grants to cover for professional services. And so when we are not having those professional services, or we're not having enough youth and families enter programs, we cannot ask for reimbursement. So when we're doing our budget, if the grant was allocated at, let's say, 100,000, we get another grant at 100,000. So we're already anticipating collecting through reimbursement 200,000, and that's how we budget. But once we actually go through that year and we only have X amount of families entering programs for whatever reason, in this particular reason, we could be the tail end of COVID. So a lot of families and youth that are not entering those programs, then we technically cannot spend that money and we can't ask for reimbursement. So there's a discrepancy there.
All right, thank you. Yeah, so how is it that they grant you that amount of money just in anticipation of more trouble?
No, they use a formula and it's a very complicated formula that I still don't understand. I'm relying totally on Excel based on that. And so they use a complicated formula that accumulates about a 3-year. And there's also a stop loss where they're doing in terms of, so if you have one bad year, there's still a percentage of a stop loss. So you're not, taking a major ding just because you had one bad year on a 3-year average. So it's through a formula based on the cases that we see, the number of filings, the number of kids being placed on probation. So they're using all those numbers and anticipating that that's the amount of families that we could serve. They're also looking at the families in the years prior that we did serve. So there's some projections there. But in the case of COVID, we definitely took a massive hit when most of our programs were in person. We weren't able to run programs, and even so, we try to change the model so that we can still run programs and we can still ask for reimbursements and collect through the reimbursements. But it still doesn't account for the major loss that we had during those years.
And the overtime figures show a pretty dramatic change. I think the numbers show, if I've got it here. 2022 overtime was almost 260,000. In 23, we only budgeted 64.
Right.
We spent 145 through June, which puts us on a pace for 290. So there's an extra increase because we can't fill the positions.
Right.
And
That's the other way we could do the job.
the only saving grace is that we're not spending the money on direct personnel, we're spending it on overtime, I guess. So much more expensive way to do business, but
Yeah,
that's the reality where we're at.
yeah.
Should we expect to see more overtime as a consequence of the cost of living changes on us? In other words, if I want to bring in the same amount of income in terms of buying power, I'm going to volunteer for more hours. And then I might resent you if you hired someone that took away those hours off of me.
There's a formula as to how overtime is awarded to folks. Those are our union positions, and there's the whole bidding process to do that. But I don't anticipate we're gonna have more overtime because of the increasing cost of living. The overtime is because we don't have enough people to cover the shifts.
Oh, yeah, I'm saying, does that take some of the pressure off you from hiring new people?
Yeah. So.
Anything else?
I'm good.
I think we're good. Thank you, George.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioners.
One quick comment, commissioners, just so y'all didn't think I lost a bar fight last night, I was attempting to rescue a rabbit from my cat. In the process, I ended up having an encounter with a piece of concrete, so.
I just thought you'd been on your bike.
The cat won.
Just
The cat won.
The cat wasn't happy, the rabbit made it, and I ended up like this, so.
Was this a wild rabbit?
It was a wild rabbit.
So you got bitten by both the cat and the rabbit, huh?
No, they didn't get bit. The rabbit was quite happy to see me.
Smart rabbit.
Well, thank you. If you have any follow-up questions, please let us know. We can follow up. And I think we're coming back for IT stuff as well as personnel in a couple of weeks. So,
Yeah.
all right.
Yes.
Thank you.
Should.
I am next, but are you ready for Superior Court? We're a little early.
What's next?
Great places with.
I got to swap people here. Give me a second. All right, so this is for Superior Court and Drug Court, and I'll do those a little separately. I think I'll do Drug Court first simply because it's kind of how I'm organized here. So the Drug Court program, we're not asking for a lot of change there. There is an increase, I believe, which is related to the fact that we had a case manager, a third case manager that was approved several years ago, was in our budget for a couple of years. For reasons that we have not been able to determine, it was removed last year because we had not filled it. We didn't fill it during COVID because and between Blake and COVID and all of our drug court. And if you take a look, you should have a chart that kind of shows the case. It's this chart that shows the caseloads. The drug court numbers, you can see in the middle, they drop way down to about 20 people. That was the result of COVID, not getting intakes, as well as the Blake decision, removing a bunch of folks out. We're now back up to about the same level that we should be at, which is around 100 active cases. So what that does now is the job that that was previously approved that we were about to hire before the bottom fell out of the market, so to speak. We would like to have that put back in and approved. So it's not so much as a change because it was in our budget before. We're not sure why it got taken out. The other request under the drug court has to do with, we're asking to spend, what was the number? It's about 18,000 in order to have the team attend the National Drug Court Convention training program. It's a 4-day training program. I think it's 4-day training program. I've been to, I believe, 3 or 4 of those programs. They're exceptionally helpful for keeping the team working within the model of drug court and doing it correctly. One of the things that is critical for drug court, if you do it wrong, you actually do damage. If you do it correctly, you get good outcomes. So historically, that's been a very valuable resource. We do have new judges who rotated in who haven't been to those trainings. We have new people in the prosecutor's office and public defenders who haven't been to those trainings. So we think that's an important thing to have in our budget. So those are really the two items on the drug court budget, which are, I guess, different if you consider that the previously approved position was somehow taken out. We're asking to have that put back in. Does that pretty much sum it up, Adam? Okay. So if you have any questions on that, I do have my subject matter expert here. Other than that, we're pretty much a flat budget on that as well.
Is the travel increase in there for drug court?
The travel, I believe that's the 18,560 that is,
It's split up among line items,
Ah, okay.
so that's the total additional.
so and again, I know we're not talking personnel today, but that would be, those are the changes in that budget. On the mental health court numbers, you can see that is an ongoing upward trend, which represents, I think, the reality of what our community is suffering from. We're pretty much maxed out at this point. There's no more folks coming into mental health court because we have 1 case manager, and with 60 folks, that's probably double what he should be managing. But so we're not actively bringing new folks into that program, even though there's clearly a need for it. So.
How do you enter the mental health court as a client, if you will?
I didn't quite catch the last part of that.
How do you get into mental health court as a client? Is there?
Oh, the entry, it's virtually the same as it would be for drug court. You're charged with a crime. The prosecutor's office has to approve you for the program. Then you go through the drug court intake process. They make sure that you fit all of the requirements of the program, that you actually have a mental health disorder that's going to qualify, and then you're admitted into that program. It's, I think, identical to the drug court admission process.
Yes, it is.
And you send a recommendation over to the PA's office and the PA decides, or that's completely in your hands?
The PA always has final say whether somebody's allowed in any of those programs.
The
PA being prosecuting attorney.
PA nominates people, right? I mean, they're the ones that say, check them out. or you
Usually
get 'em
what-
first.
Usually it comes from defense. Will decide if
Defense.
that's a program that they
Okay.
think their client would benefit from and that they would like to try. Then it goes to the prosecutor's office for screening. They either say yay or nay. Then it comes back for the rest of the process.
Yeah.
But they're the gatekeeper under the statute.
Yeah.
And that has to be a felony crime?
I believe a felony is
Yes.
required in that, yeah.
It had been, but then municipal courts were invited to join drug court processes, and that's
Mhm.
still to be set up yet here. And
They're, as far as I know, they're still working on that. Are you familiar with where that's at?
I've been in meetings with them, but just discussing the process of
Okay.
drug court setting one up.
Okay.
So whether that moves forward is yet to be determined.
well, the motivations are a little bit different without the felony
They are.
charge, so.
It's a lot easier for me to understand the drug court. Presumably, drug court is, the intent is basically to clean up an individual's substance abuse disorder. At least that's one of the primary goals, to rehabilitate the individual. What's the goal on the mental health side? What things do they have to do?
Well, there are a portion of them that do suffer from chemical dependency addiction, so that is addressed. A lot of it has to do with skills and with their mental illness, how to cope with that, medication if necessary, and just learning life skills on how to continue living, I guess you would say, productive life with mental illness and how to manage that.
I can also speak to that. I worked as a public defender for mental health commitment hearings for about 12 years before coming on the bench. So I worked with the same population. One of the problems you have with folks with mental illness is oftentimes they don't really recognize they have a mental illness, so they don't think they need medication. So part of the goal of a program like this is to get them to the point where they're willing to do the management that they need, even if they don't think they need it, because then they can actually function. The simple analogy is if you are chasing a rabbit and you end up with a big hole on the side of your face, you recognize that because your brain tells you you got a sore cheek. When your brain has a problem, it doesn't always understand it has a problem because it's not quite working right. So it's a little different situation, and it's a difficult population to work with because of that. There is
You get an A+ for graphics.
I tell you.
But I'm still a bit inquisitive with the drug court candidate. If they violate their sobriety, they enough, they're going to end up being thrown out of drug court and back in jail. Is that right?
Yes, simplified, yes.
And what's the parallel with the mental health court?
I would say it's a refusal to attend mental health services, to take medication if that's required. That would be an equivalency, because as people stop going to their appointments, stop taking their medication, especially, they slip back into their mental illness, much like a substance abuser would slip back into substance use.
So the mental health person that's fallen off the wagon, then you don't see that until there's a manifestation, right?
Typically, that would be
Or
the case.
do they
because,
do a UA? For them?
the UA, if they're determined to have a substance use disorder, then they do UA. Just
But
like
otherwise, so
would.
of all the people in mental health court, how many are not involved with drug abuse?
I don't have an exact number, but I would say that it's probably about 20% are not or less. Most of them do have some form of substance use disorder or use substances to mask their illness. So it is not uncommon for somebody who suffers from mental illness to use an illegal substance to mask their mental illness.
You realize my question is, I'm puzzled how you would possibly determine whether they should go into drug court or into mental health court, and it's got to be a judgment call, obviously, and
Yeah, it is. And we look at kind of the nexus between their crime and whether it's with substance use or whether it's with mental illness. And sometimes that is hard to determine. We've definitely taken people into drug court that once they've got clean, they start exhibiting mental illness much more than they had before. And then we have to decide if we're going to move them over to mental health court or if we're going to, adopt and use those resources in drug court, which is typically what we would do. Same with mental health court, although it's less often. So usually their mental illness is known as a factor prior to coming into mental health court, usually. And they do have an assessment for their mental health needs prior to coming into the program.
of the 20% or so, roughly speaking, that are in the mental health category almost purely, not that that really happens.
Yeah.
What kind of crimes are we typically seeing there?
We're usually seeing, I would say, some minor DVs would be typical there, maybe some minor thefts, disorderly conduct, malicious mischief, those kinds of things where it's their mental health that's kind of driving their behaviors and they're not engaged in reality as closely as, as other people in society, I guess you could say.
That wouldn't put you in the felony category, would it?
Some of them do and some of them are, when they do go in, sometimes it's a certain level. So yeah, if it's an assault 4 DV, it's not, but if it's an assault 3 DV, it is. And those are all done with the case of the victim advocating for them to get into the program. But yeah, it depends on the level of the crime, the money associated with it, if it's theft, things like that, that would indicate whether it's a felony or not.
And if they go back to jail, how do we handle that?
Well, you mean if they're terminated or if they're just go back to jail as a sanction?
Well, yeah, if they're terminated from the program because they weren't abiding by the rules.
Yeah. Just like drug court, they would be terminated and then they would go, they'd have a hearing to determine if they're going to be terminated. So
Terminated from the program.
from the program,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay.
So from the program, nothing more extreme than that. So
Not like the movie.
the team would advocate for or against termination. The judge on the drug court would make the determination if they're going to go up for a termination hearing. And then that would be set out and then they would go before another judge typically. And they would have a termination hearing where prosecution would make the case for their termination, defense would make their case for them to remain in the program, and then the judge would make a decision. If it's
Yeah,
just
so
decided that, oh, sorry.
that person going back to jail couldn't really share a cell possibly when the drug court fellow going back can? Is that a true statement through there?
Could
I think that's
share a
a,
cell?
I think that's up to the jail to determine
Yeah.
who's appropriate to be housed together.
Yeah,
We don't have any say over that.
I'm thinking we try not to let mental health people share jail cells.
I know that they have a medical ward and I think that they put people with extreme or unmanageable mental health issues in there. I can't speak for the jail on that, but not everybody on mental health court has extreme levels of psychosis or mental illness. And I would say probably of the population of people that are impacted by a substance use disorder, a large portion of them have mental health to some degree that goes with that.
Including the commissioners.
Well, we all could say that there's a level of mental health in
So
our heads.
I appreciate the indulgence of my colleagues. I could ask 1,000 more questions, but I won't ask any more.
Of course.
But
thank you.
one of the things that I remember in a hearing, and I think it was Judge Scudder who came to us when he was on district court. And we ended up discussing somebody who had died. I think walking in front of a train or something like that. And he said, we all feel really badly because she was familiar to us. And he had a set of filing documents about an inch thick that she had been in and out and in and out and in and out. Obviously, somebody who needed to get some other kind of mental health assistance, but we're not set up to do that. We're not a mental health facility.
Yeah.
We're not a licensed mental health facility. That was supposed to be several years ago, the big motivator to have that initial mental health court established. And there were a whole bunch of reasons why we couldn't get it going at that time.
And I would love to see more resources for the mentally ill. And that brings up a good point. We see over and over people that suffer from mental illness and substance use disorder. They're not just nameless people to us. We know them, we see them on the streets, we see them out in public, in whatever state they're in, whether they're doing well or whether they're doing poorly. And to other people, it's easy to look past them, but we know a lot of them. We see a lot of them, we see them for who they are. And it's hurtful to see them in a bad condition or a bad state of mind.
Any other questions on drug court?
The increased expenditure for the training, I think, is a good idea, particularly now after so much turmoil in the legal system and so many changes have happened.
Yeah.
It's important to keep up to date on the latest legal changes. I mean, that's a whole subcategory of training.
It really
And,
is. And I will say, I appreciate that. Prior to the pandemic, we had been requesting to go every other year. I just don't think it's fiscally responsible to go every year at that expense. And it really has shown a tremendous impact on our team and our programs when we do go. So I appreciate that.
I'm trying, I might have to recant a little bit. On these trips, I understand where it's important to keep abreast of issues. I would think you wouldn't want to vacate a year. You would want to just rotate your team through so that somebody's going through there all the time.
That's not a bad idea. And I have to say, it never really occurred to me to do it that way. But that is definitely a very good suggestion, actually.
And I think if that's what the board was more comfortable with, that type of an ongoing education, I think we could certainly adapt to that.
Oh,
Absolutely.
I don't dare say I'm more comfortable with that. I dare say it's a decision you have to make, but it is a question I ask. I don't know the answer.
I think it's a very,
Makes sense.
yeah, a
The
very
cap-
smart question.
The complicating factor is your staff turnover,
It is.
and so
Yeah.
if you have, and I can't remember if you've got a lot of staff turnover, but the
Uh,
new staff, it's more important to get to train.
Currently, we've held our staff pretty well.
Yeah.
I think I was actually doing the budget this year, realizing that in 2024, all of my staff will be at their top steps.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
we're holding staff pretty good right now.
And curiously enough, that argument could go both ways.
Yeah.
I mean, the assumption is, you're not replacing the staff more than 10% a year. If you're
Yeah.
replacing it 50% a year, I don't know
Right.
what you do. But
Yeah,
I think you clearly have a happy camp there, so I'm not too
Yeah.
concerned over that.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. So I'll move to the Superior Court itself, court administration essentially. Again, we're really not asking for any increase that's noticeable. There is the two things I want to point to, one of which is not on the agenda for today, which has to do with some computers. Historically, the administrative office of the courts has provided, I believe it's about 10 computers to the courts, and then replaced those on I think an every 3-year basis. That was taken out of the state budget, out of AOC's budget. So we still need those computers, obviously. And so that's going to be rolling into our budget. So that's just on there really more for awareness at this point. I know that'll be brought up at the next meeting. The other has to do with the court security request that we've put forward. It's it's $195,000 security cost. This was put together with the assistance of Kim Hort at IT. She reached out and we got some assessments for cameras and door locks and things at the Hall of Justice to increase some of the security problems. We then, I believe that may have been before this board before. Since that time, we've reached out to AOC and we've gotten a grant approved of $117,385 of that. So that shows in our budget as a revenue, the 117, and then the 195 shows in as an expense. With that included, our increase over last year is about a little over 17,000. If that security grant project isn't approved by the board, then we will actually be decreasing our budget request for next year by about 60,000, because that grant will go away if we don't use it for that project. It's got a 40% match, which is why there's a $78,000 cost to the county in that. That would be providing perimeter cameras on some of the really blind spots at the Hall of Justice, so employees coming and going as well as public, and then some increased capacities in the internal door locking setup so that IT can manage that or maintenance can manage that better. So those are the two significant, I would say, changes in our budget. In 25, we do still have the 6th judge. I'm aware this board has not chosen to support that request. That also included a request, I believe, for a judicial assistant. And as I indicated, when we made that request, we didn't know even for sure if that would be needed, even if a 6th judge was approved. So if you roll those two things back out of the 2025 budget, we're not requesting any real change there either, because we have the coverage in our budget for the court commissioners that we're currently using and expecting to use. And our proposal, if we had the 6th judge, was to pull a bunch of money out of that account, but we weren't able to do that because of the way the budget software is set up. So really for the next 2 years, we're asking essentially less other than the security project for next year. And then pretty much status quo. We're not asking for changes in staffing other than what we've already had approved. So any questions on that?
I want to be sure that you have sufficient court commissioner resource dollars available for you.
I think we've got plenty of dollars at this point. I just don't have, I don't have commissioners available. I'm having a real, just like hiring staffing, we're down one judicial assistant. We're having difficulty. I think we may have a receptionist finally hired. I think we have our court investigator finally hired a year after that was approved. So we're having the same hiring problems with the court commissioners. It's a unique issue because if I don't give a court commissioner enough time to essentially not practice law, then they're not available to us as normally. We might need them on a day while they have court cases or they have conflicts they develop. So the court commissioner on a part-time basis is a real challenge. It creates more work for our staff to try and schedule people as we need them. We have lost, I think we're down to 4 right now that we have that are actively available. One of those being Judge Warning, who we twisted his arm to fill in through the end of the year for a couple of dockets. So without his willingness to do that, we would still be, we wouldn't have coverage for all of our existing dockets. So it isn't the money for the court commissioners, it's the bodies that we can't get. And the problem with that is court commissioners have to be lawyers. There's a significant hole in the lawyer population in town. A lot of people have retired and haven't been replaced. Same problem that the prosecutor's office and Office of Public Defense have in hiring the lawyers. You got to bring them from somewhere else. I know, I believe we just brought somebody in from Texas for one of those positions. So, I mean, it's just a challenge finding the people. But I don't think we have a problem paying for the court commission. We just can't find them to do it. So, and that was, again, that was another of the factors that went into our discussion about a 6th judge, which again, and that's not on the table today. We've left it in our budget that the budget was submitted prior to our discussion a couple of weeks ago. And you'll probably hear us back next fall asking again, because we think it's a the appropriate way to proceed forward. If the board is of a mind to re-entertain that at some point this fall, we certainly would be willing to come back and make another presentation. So questions on our budget?
I do want to go back to drug court revenues.
Sure.
A huge amount of the revenue for that program comes from
Mental health tax,
CJTA dollars initially.
CJT.
But a bigger portion does come from
Yeah, I don't know.
the behavioral health tax. Where do we find that behavioral health contribution being transferred over?
In the revenue, that's the transfer in, in the revenue, that's the transfer in.
The operating transfer?
Yeah, and that's
Yes.
both 1/10 and CJTA are
Okay.
both in there. It's not separated.
You know what the number for CJT is, Adam, off the top of your head?
I believe it's about 25,000 that we request.
Okay.
I'm not sure how much we utilized. A lot of it goes towards resources for our clients, and over the pandemic that was reduced. It's going back up, obviously, but we didn't utilize as much. as we
UAs
had.
is another one. isn't it?
UAs,
Yeah.
UAs and resources for our
Mhm.
clients, yeah. And when the numbers are lower with our clients, like they were in 2021, and then climbing in 2022, we didn't utilize that funding as much. But I anticipate that we'll be using it more.
So I think the health department submitted a budget without revenues from the mental health tax, right?
Yeah, they submitted their budget showing the mental health tax revenue coming in just through March.
Mhm.
But then all of the expenditures that are off the mental health tax have stayed status quo for 2024 and 2025 because there's sufficient fund balance to carry us through for the full year of 24 and the full year of 25.
So there'd be no need for it. If they make the assumption to take it out, it doesn't affect the other departments at this point in time until the end of 2025.
Correct.
Yeah.
How much of that department's surplus can be returned to the general fund?
I don't know the answer to that question. Yeah, I don't know. I'd have to find out, do a little research. I don't know. I don't know what the RCW is on it. The
I
specifics.
mean, I know we send them a lot of
Hmm.
money from the general fund. So I would imagine theoretically, their reserves ought to be whatever they don't spend from the grants they get from other agencies. But then we've also heard that they have to send that money back. So
Very little of the mental health tax is being spent by the actual Department of Health and Human Services. It's very small. It's like a piece of one person.
I mean,
Is that what you're saying?
I'm actually saying, if we don't have a mental health tax providing revenues and other programs, the health department surplus is one of the areas we ought to be transferring. I mean, because most of it is general fund money.
I don't
What-
think that's correct. I think mental health, I think the health department and human service, they're not on the general fund. The health department and the health and human services are 100% funded by all of their different grants and revenue sources.
I don't think so. I think there's a chunk in there from general fund.
I can research that.
One comment I would just make, because we didn't really get into the revenue piece, but we are funded significantly by the mental health tax for drug court. And I know this board is entertaining the idea of cutting or ending that tax. One thing just to keep in the back of your mind is if that tax does end and then revenues decrease otherwise down the line to keep this program going, you wouldn't be able to reinstate the mental health tax and use that money, because then it would be supplanting money that was coming from the general fund. So if we switch the funding from mental health to the general fund, and then down the line, 5 years, determine that we really need that money, we wouldn't be able to use that money for drug court because it would be supplanting. So that's just obviously a observation that needs to be taken into account on that discussion, which is not today.
That's probably a good argument for making. If we have surpluses, we ought to be reducing the property tax for all the property owners rather than individual sales tax things, but
That may be
that's a different discussion.
these are executive branch discussions that are outside of my purview. Yeah, I'm just giving you the information I know. Any questions that else we can answer on Superior Court? I do note, and Danielle and I spent quite a bit of time going through our budget from the last couple of years, and we made some significant cuts in last year's budget balances to move things around, so we didn't need new money this year. And so all of our reorganizational pieces that we did last year, which I told you we were going to do without asking for more money, we were able to do that. So all of we're not asking for more money other than the security grant, which we've got or security project, which we've got the grant for.
Yeah.
So
Security makes sense. This isn't in your budget, but I'm just curious. We had, was it called? You were looking at some kind of a study. Somebody was going to study doing efficiency things.
That's our-
I'm just curious on it.
yeah, that's we had the National Center for State Courts, and this is the second time we've had them come out. They came out in 2000, I believe, in 12 or 13, and did some kind of an overall analysis of our civil processes. And we made some changes in how we did things, and it seemed to help. And then people get into bad habits and things. So they came out, they did another analysis. They interviewed all of our staff. They interviewed a lot of the public defenders, prosecutors, other lawyers that are involved in the system. They're working on a report. And do you know the timelines, Danielle? Danielle, do you know the timeline when we're expecting a report from National Center?
I think they were gonna have a draft to us to review around October-ish.
Okay,
Oh,
And then hopefully
okay.
we'll have something finalized November, December this year.
okay.
Yeah.
So,
I was just more curious. It popped up.
yeah, and we've been trying. Judge Scudder, who obviously used to be head of the Office of Public Defense here, he kind of took it under his wing to see if we could figure out a way to get the cases working after COVID really just destroyed processes for us.
Yeah.
And it got a lot of people into some bad habits. And so we're aggressively pushing cases through the system. And what we're hoping is that this is going to give us a little bit more ideas that we can improve the situation even more. So
Yeah.
we're doing what we can. We do a lot of trials, as I explained when we were here a couple of weeks ago. We do more trials than most counties do for our size. So
We we saw that yesterday in Defenders. He gave us a little, some stats. Yeah, on the number of trials we do and for our size.
it's a lot.
You're right. Yeah.
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 And those, they take a judge off of anything else because that's 100% focus. I mean, a docket, you can jumble a few other things in there, but when you're doing a trial, that's what you're doing. So.
Question? It's about drug court. I don't recall from whom I heard this. It wasn't your staff. The statement was there were 8 graduates of drug court in 22 and 15 for 23. Is that true? And that's a result of the pipeline having been throttled?
Yes, that sounds correct. And actually, I believe I did say those numbers in our presentation in August or yeah, July. Was it July when we did that presentation? Yeah, I believe without looking into our system, I believe it was 8 and that was around 18 this year. That is a result of the dip in numbers. And then as we gain numbers, of course, everybody starts at the beginning of the program. So it takes time for them to build up. So we're going to start seeing those graduations.
So the 18 for this year was the first 6 months.
I believe that number may have included through August, that at that time we knew who was graduating in August. I believe.
Is there another graduation scheduled this year?
November.
November.
Yeah. I'm not sure of the numbers at that time because people still have between now and then to finish things up and submit that they're going to be graduating.
Your presentation at the time was heading in the right direction, and that was much appreciated. I'm still lamenting that we've been operating for quite a while and we don't have, I mean, the universe you presented was really small compared to what I think has gone through drug court. And
Yes. I would like more, but it's really difficult, as I think I said in the presentation, it's difficult with graduates because there's no, we have no statute of authority over them, so tracking them post graduation.
No,
is difficult.
I realize that, but I don't, I'm presuming here that there hasn't been much effort in the past. My impression is that one of the successes of drug court is that we have a very familial sense between the participants, maybe not the first month, but by the 8th month or something like that, they're pretty much looking like they don't want to disappoint you. They don't want to disappoint Judge Basher. They're really seeing some fresh air. I would think that they would be able to be happy to just keeping tabs with you and you asking questions. And what I'm looking for isn't ever, there was Sam Smith over there and he did this. I'm not interested in the individual per se. I'm interested in the overall numbers. In the end, we have to do, I think, a balancing of costs versus the gains, including tangible and intangibles. And despite what it might seem, I am not at all oblivious to intangible. Sometimes intangible is everything. So, but I can't get there until I know that we're completely documented on the tangibles.
Yes, and I appreciate that, Commissioner. It's not necessarily a willingness for people to respond. It's our ability to reach out to them. They don't have the same addresses. There were people that I found through Facebook and sent them messages, but we know how Facebook Messenger works. It goes to another folder that they may not see because I'm not friends with them. So yeah, we use social media. We use other graduates.
That was part of why I was hinting. I'm not suggesting, I'm just sort of asking that make sure that you've got enough staff resources to answer these questions. And I think it just requires, like George said earlier about needing a champion. You just need a champion in there.
Yes. I do appreciate that. And one of the things that we are working on right now, very heavily and very deep into, is an alumni group. So we've gotten some alumni together. We're developing an alumni group, and through that, we may be able to get better resources to be able to reach out and get better information
That
on a
sounds
larger population of people.
Yeah, they're the ones who would know the best.
Yes, absolutely. So yes, resources help in that department, but I do have one case manager that's a passion for, and she's doing great work in that department.
Any other questions for any of Superior Court's divisions?
Good.
I'm good.
Any
Right.
public comments on any of this? Everybody's, okay, I don't see anybody listening that's raised any hands.
We're all done. I'm going to go get my cheek x-rayed. So
Oh,
thank you for your time.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Yeah, on the amendment stuff, you just need to send it to me because I'm keeping a file.
I'm glad you did.
Mine is pretty.
I'm glad you did that. I was starting to worry about it and then I was.
Oh.
Thank you. Okay, so next, the last thing, I don't think we have anybody else. I was just gonna wrap up on go back to mine that I didn't get to finish on the first session. So, sorry. So, we have one more, tab 2.
Tab 2.
Tab 2. And I'll just talk off of the summary sheet, basically. So I think
Okay.
we wrapped up with the Forest federal funds. And then the Stadium Convention Funds Center is next. and that is a sales tax collection. The thing that I note on that one is, in my write-up is that we receive the sales tax in, then we transfer out to the tourism fund, that's 60,000. But that, particular account, we've just maintained a very, steady, conservative estimate for revenues. And so, the account has built up, like I said, a fund balance. So it has about $284,000 in fund balance. And it's traditionally been bringing in, 100 to 120,000 a year, but we're only transferring 60
Is this what we talked about this yesterday, right?
when we were
And
talking
we
about
made a decision
tourism.
to send money out to the cities and hold some back.
That's actually in a different fund. when I'll
That's a
get to
different
that.
one?
That's
Okay.
under cumulative reserve. But the stadium fund, Stadium Center, it too is the same thing. We've been budgeting very conservatively and we haven't been transferring out all of the funds. So my recommendation to you is we can keep this here in the event you need funds for a capital improvement or something to our own tourism facilities, or if there's a special one-time project.
The source of that money is a portion of the sales tax.
Yes, it's the transient lodging tax
It's-
specifically.
It's transit lodging tax.
Yeah. Mhm.
It's not part of the rebate from the state sales
No.
tax. And it's in a stadium fund. Can it be used for promotion of tourism?
I thought I brought my RCW on that. I believe so. It's slated for, it's very similar to the lodging tax in that it's for tourism, but it's geared more towards capital projects. It allows you to finance, which we don't have very much coming in to finance much of anything, but it allows you to finance a project.
So if somebody came up and wanted to put a music arena or whatever in, and the county thought that was a good idea and would bring people in, you could use some of this to help a little bit.
Right.
It would probably be an RFP or something, I would guess.
So Kim got a grant from the state ag department for electrical light improvements in the parking garage. And it seemed to me that went over budget and we had to pick up the difference from the general fund. Is it, do you recall if that happened? Seems like there was a problem with getting it
Yeah.
done within the
I'm
budget.
not familiar with it for this year.
I didn't even think about possibly.
The parking garage?
No, it was the parking
Right,
lights for the parking lot.
right. She got a grant for,
$48,000 or something like that.
right, that, and they came back and said, you really probably ought to go to another stronger bulb, which, or
Okay,
that would cause a redo of some of that, and we went ahead with it. So, yeah,
which means on something like that, it usually means it comes out of the general fund. But I'm saying if we have a source for capital improvements, you probably should go back and adjust.
I don't know if I can go, I don't know. I'd have to talk to our auditor if it was a prior year, I don't know that you can.
No,
change.
it was this year.
Oh, was this year?
Yeah. It was an expenditure this year.
Okay, we can research that. Parking lot lights. The other thing is to consider, another option is we actually are earning, like I said, 100 to 122,000, but we're only transferring 60 out of this. We also contribute from the general fund to the Expo Center about, I think, 125,000 on an annual basis. So maybe there's an opportunity to reduce the general fund contribution but increase this fund's contribution instead.
If it goes to capital. I don't think the $125,000 goes to capital.
Yeah, I don't
I
know.
think that's more of
Yeah,
salaries and.
yeah,
main-
but they
and
have
operations.
had several capital expenditures there. I don't know. So
And the
in the
PFD,
research.
the Public Facilities District also has a revenue source that they help kick in for improvements also, I think.
Oh, okay.
So,
And you know that the city of Kelso is trying to fix up a kayak launch facility on the Cowyman, and their estimate was about 100% off, so it was 35,000, and now it's up to 70 or 75. These numbers you want to chew a little bit, confirm them, but is that the kind of thing? I mean, that's the kind of project to me that is capital and maybe is a useful thing to do. I know they've murmured about contacting us for support on that. And my response has always been, we'll take it into consideration.
I can
So you could
research that.
probably use,
I can
Use lodging
research.
tax funds, right?
yeah,
Mhm.
there's something in the back of my mind that says that for funds that are designated for capital improvements, it has to be on property we own.
Oh,
The
probably.
lodging tax dollars though are different because we've helped with construction on other things.
Yeah.
So that might be the fund to use it out of rather than this stadium fund.
Oh, that's
and I
what I
think-
was talking about.
Okay, okay.
I can do a little research and
Yeah.
get the specifics. I didn't bring with me today
But
You're
they
right.
haven't made a request yet though, right?
No, they've been threatening for a year.
yeah. You're just basically bringing this to our attention, that we've been real conservative on
Mhm.
projecting what this is going, and now we're building up this
Yeah. So we have an,
reserve in there and
yeah, so we have an opportunity to provide.
to use it what it was supposed to be used for. Yeah,
That does cause me to help remind whoever sees this recording that I don't know what we'd do if we didn't have the landfill.
yeah.
I mean, that's
Well,
a huge
we
portion.
we wouldn't have hired as many people as we've hired in the last 4 years.
Well, except we're not really wantonly hiring people. In many cases, we're responding to RCWs that say you must do this or that.
Yeah, but those RCWs don't give us the money to pay for them.
Oh, yeah, no, I
So
understand.
it squeezes. So there's a
Unintended
squeeze.
mandates.
I
Yeah.
remember the days before the landfill and we would get down to the final days before the budget had to be approved. And we'd look at our own code that said we must have 8.3. And it was like, how far can we violate our own code because the money wasn't there because of the people that, yeah, so.
Just needed a CR.
You're absolutely right, though, aren't, I mean, that the landfill has been pretty critical in helping fund things.
Okay, so I'll move on. The next is affordable housing. This is in finances department. But really, I don't think we spend the money. It is, and this is one where it's recording fees are associated with this account. So the revenue stream has decreased. The last budget amendment we did in July, we had to reduce the revenue and the expenses because it does not have a fund balance. Everything that comes in has been consumed. So I'm trying to hold the budget to, I've reduced the revenue budget needs to, I've reduced our expenditures for this to equal the revenue budget. And so I'm trying to stay conservative on this one. So. The next one, if there isn't any questions on affordable housing,
Excuse me on that. Did either of you two catch the comment that Nippon changed owners or NORPAC changed owners? Did you
No,
hear-
I did not hear that.
Oh, I wonder if that was a secret I wasn't supposed to share. The only reason I mentioned that is if it's a sale of property, then all of a sudden we get a big bump up in real estate sales estate.
Mhm.
And
Hmm.
I remember once on the city, there's a power plant in the Mint Farm complex that was owned by a Vista.
Puget Sound Energy.
And then they sold it to Puget Sound Energy, and it was just a transfer. Because the company reorganized and changed its name, but there was a purchase transfer. And the city got this big dollop of money for real estate, the REIT. And
Yeah.
interesting little
Well, I
extra money.
hope not, but I mean, I don't want the government to drain funds out of the private sector is really all I'm saying.
Right.
And I was gonna ask you, Kathy, on that same fund, doc fund, I thought I understood, and as time has gone on, I've understood that I didn't understand. How much money is in there and how much typically or how much has come in the last 2 years, say? By you?
on affordable housing.
Yeah, that one that you called.
Okay, so in affordable housing, it looks like I reduced the 23 budget to 150,500. But it looks like previously we were budgeting 350,000 for 2022. And in 2021, 369. We budgeted 369,000. But for both of those years, we only received 200,000 in 2022 and 189,000 in 2021. So it looks like we've, in 2022 and 2023, we over budgeted based upon actuals. And that coupled with the fact that the recording fees are also declining is why we're drastically reducing the budget to 150,000.
So that comes from recording fees?
Yes, recording fees, a particular recording fee.
But because it goes into the general fund, so the surplus, what we collect that we don't spend is shown somewhere else, right?
I don't.
Because you don't have an ending fund on this, because
Yeah, we don't
I
have a
remember
fund balance.
we were giving $750,000 awards about 3 times in the last year.
Yeah, but that's out of the doc recording funds, of which we have a fair amount still in there. And some of that was that 1406 money also, and Kathy's nodding yes, so I should be quiet here.
Yeah, it's this particular one is a very small portion of the recording fees. It is specifically for I guess affordable housing. So there's other doc recording fees that are going other places, other funds in our budget. So
And that must be Gina's department, because she's the one that shares us how much we can spend on that.
right.
Yeah,
So why she doesn't have jurisdiction over this fund, I don't understand.
Yeah, I don't know either. That was my question.
I think she has a 1406 fund also.
Yes.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, and this one is, well, this one is an 18301 account. And I believe there's another 18 something account that's low income housing. instead of for affordable housing. So
Oh.
it's a little confusing to a newbie like me. And
Yeah.
it's a very small portion of the reporting fees that are going here.
What tangled web we weave.
Yeah, I'm not sure why it was in finance. That's a question I had, but,
Well, actually, if I'm going back to my first 4 years, the Human Services Department was focused on community mental health because we were providing the community mental health. And so the whole idea of even Veteran Services was handled out of this office.
oh, okay.
And I think that's left over from when the previous finance director had these different programs. Since then, of course, that community mental health has gone totally to the BHO and the state. So we don't offer that service at all. And Gina's mandates are, they've shifted to the other human service activities
Mhm.
like housing and homelessness. So
It's the bulk of the money is utilized in an expenditure account called other. And then there's like 70 something thousand that's transferred out. Or it used to be in the range of 100,000. And I reduced it to try to make it balance, the budget balance. But yeah, so it's significantly reduced and finance really doesn't do anything with this fund. So I think if it's all right, I'll ask Gina and Carol if this fund should move over to their area in the new budget.
Yeah. It's worth the question because just on the surface, it's
I-
kind of feeling that way.
I would certainly support a move over there unless there's some other significant
Yeah,
reason why
And
that's.
I'll get the research to figure out why. It's not significant. It's 150,000.
It's just one of several areas where monies that come in get separated out and we never get the full picture of how much money there is available and we end up building up big reserves that don't realize it because it's split.
On this one, no.
Yeah, this one,
That was the
this one
good.
has been parceled out.
If I can move on, are we good with that? Law and justice, which is also I think y'all term it the criminal justice fee tax. It's actually a tax. It brings in, so I'm gonna get there, hold on. This one also is under finance area and it's a sales tax, it's a use tax. So when the state distributes this, the state treasurer distributes 10% of this tax, these monies to the county in which the tax was collected. So this is one where I guess, in other words, we get a rebate, we get the money from the state. And so this one is numerous departments are utilizing this fund. We have a number of departments and we're bringing in over $1 million for this particular fund. Historically, it's brought in 1.4 million, 1.6 million. We're budgeting conservatively for it to come in at 1 million, but it has a fund balance accumulated of $1.6 million right now. And we spend it in the areas of Superior Court. There's some I think one position, county clerk, one position, district court. I think this is portion of a position. And then we spend it also on legal services. So I think it comes out of our PA office. And then we also have law enforcement. We have the sheriff's office off of this fund as well. So it's split up a lot of different ways. And it has a total budget. Hold on, flipping back and forth. It has a total budget of $1 million, for 24, $1,052,000, and for 25, $1,079,000,
Hmm.
and a total of 7 FTEs.
So we've built up a balance in this over $1 million.
Yeah,
So.
Over how long a period of time?
it's several years,
Yeah.
because we're budgeting it to come in at $1 million. And as I said, it's been coming in almost $1 million. It's been coming in $1.4 million and $1.5 million. And this year we're on track for it to be not quite $1.5 million, but probably close to $1.4 million for this year.
Yeah. So, and we tie the expenditures to that. We get 10% back from the state. Hopefully they're spending the other 90% wisely of our people's money. But we tie it to bodies. I'm curious why hey, we're gonna get this much back. Is there an opportunity to say, okay, law and order, 50%, I'm just using numbers, 50% of the budget is law and order. Why don't they get 50% of that and it just divide down instead of, we always tie it to bodies, then you have to track all that, or maybe it comes back to us with the stipulation and it has to be
Yeah.
tied that
It-
way.
here's-
So I think it
There
says,
is a stipulation.
it says the county gets 10% and the rest of it is distributed per capita. amongst
Yes,
the between the
is.
cities and the county.
yes, you're right.
So that
It's
all that's
10%.
Okay.
collected stays in Cowlitz County,
Okay.
but there's,
All right.
there's a distribution to the different counties.
But-
Right.
And Castle Rock is happy for that formula because
Well,
they
yeah,
don't they don't generate.
okay, then that makes more sense.
Yeah,
And
it gets distributed to the county and the cities, the rest of it based upon population.
So there was
And they must have a reason why they set aside this 10 for us to do something with it.
I think because we're collecting it.
Yeah.
I think,
So it's more like an administration fee,
yeah.
Yeah, but you can only
but you can't
spend,
take it in, you can't
Right.
take it into general fund. You
Yeah.
gotta use it in.
It is probably something that the lobbyists worked out the formula.
Gotcha.
I mean, it just sounds like might have been generated by the county's request, but the cities have law enforcement too, so.
Yeah.
So
so it can only be spent on, it, for the purposes, criminal justice purposes of mutual benefit could be included. But it says that it is, but are not limited to construction, improvement and expansion of jails, court facilities, juvenile justice facilities, and services with ancillary benefits to the civil justice system. So it doesn't look like we've spent any of this on any capital items.
So basically you could have been accumulating this over the years and if you wanted, you need a new roof on something, or you need air conditioning, or you need a new building, you could theoretically do it from this?
Yes, that's what that's the way I read it. And so that I'm just saying with the fund balance that we have, we may want to look at utilizing it for some capital improvements to the jails or the Hall of Justice.
I know, don't we have a
Juvenile
roof issue at
detention.
juvenile? Or
there's
the
some
jail?
repairs that we could figure that out.
Yeah.
Now, here's the interesting bit, a little bit of history. So this tax has been on, if I remember correctly, it was part of the early 2000s.
How much is it, Dennis?
It's a
It's the
1/10 of
0.3%.
1% is the figure.
Oh, it is a 0.1?
So we get the $1 million. And that's the combination of the 10% and then our 40% of the population.
Gotcha.
But 1/10, as we know from the mental health tax, is bringing in about 2.3.
Yeah, 2
Okay, so there's a balance building up that we're not even showing on this, I think, but I'm not sure. However, when they first allocated the 7 FTEs to be funded out of this fund, and we hit the recession, the Great Recession, 2009, 10, 11, and 12, the county commissioners actually took general fund monies and put into this fund, so they didn't have to lay any of those folks off. They cut staff elsewhere. And and we were doing that for years, and I kept asking, well, why are we still subsidizing out of the general fund for these 7 people when the reserves are building up? And so you'll notice that it's not, that transfer is not being made anymore, but that was just kind of a recent, relatively few years later.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm still needing some clarification. It's a 0.1% sales tax, check?
Yes,
Okay, and the 10% that we're talking about here is 10% of that 0.1%?
yes. 1/10 of 1% is 2.3. Right?
Yeah, let's
That's-
call it.
Get my
Yeah.
calculator.
Let's
Okay.
just call it that, yeah.
So there's 10% of that 2.3 comes to us. We also get 40% of
Because of based
of the
upon
balance, because that's our
population.
population share. And the other 60% of whatever's left goes to the cities.
The other,
That's why we're only showing a mill.
but then you threw in Longview and the Castle Rock, and Castle Rock was happy over this, and that's when I got
Well,
lost. I don't know what-
I'm saying Castle Rock is happy because they don't have very many stores.
Are they happy or they
It's
just
not
don't
based
care?
on, it's based on what is collected countywide rather than within the cities.
Mhm.
But
which
the
is like-
state keeps the 50%.
No.
No.
It all comes back locally.
Yeah.
We get 10%
And 40%.
and then 40% of the balance, and the cities get the other 60%.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so they
And
get
the
some of
cities
this
get
money.
it based on a per capita allocation or something.
Yeah.
What I did not know until I saw section 2 or clause 2 is that it's subjected to a referendum. Oh, no, it's section in.
Section
paragraph
1. Section 1 says
It can be
it's
repealed by
subject to a repeal by referendum.
referendum.
Again,
It can be repealed by referendum.
interesting.
So there's a procedure. There's 2 types of referendums generally. One where the legislative body makes the referral to the voters. The other one is triggered by petition drive.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
I
right.
didn't see supplanting language in this particular statute.
I don't
so-
either.
I would. And I don't, I'm not trying to lay things on your plate because I want you to get through the budget, but at some point down the road, I would like, we always seem to have these funds like this one that we end up doing bodies with, and you can be used, and we let our buildings go to heck. And we have people in that Hall of Justice, we're talking to Judge Basher today, and one trial during the summer, they got jurors sitting in 90 degrees, you know, but we have funds to help take care of that, but we don't seem to know it, or I don't know it at least. And so it'd be helpful to have a list at some point in time, what can actually be used to help out some of these buildings and some of these departments.
That's why when I was looking at these fund balances, then I pulled the RCW because I'm thinking, okay, what can that, because it's really right now at this point, it's one-time money that's accumulated. So it'd be great for a one-time project or special project or something. And so I just need to get with the auditor and make sure that I'm interpreting some of this correctly.
So,
See if we can really apply this.
yeah,
And
like I say, I apologize for putting something else on the plate. I'm not asking for it
that's-
right away, but I think at some point in time, it'd be good to know.
yeah, and especially, that's why I highlighted it. And I don't know if in y'all's, I circled certain things, and if I if I copied it, do yours have circles on certain
I don't-
sections?
no.
No, okay, just mine. But that's when I circled it and said court facilities, and I specifically circled that one because maybe we have an opportunity here to utilize this to the benefit of our community to, like
Yeah,
you
we got
said,
some-
make those courtrooms.
Some
um,
buildings in real
condition.
need of help and if you can improve that, it should save you some big expense down the road, or at least help.
So anyway,
Interesting.
so
Okay.
this is something we need some research on, but I think it's a good thing to have this fund balance if we can use it on our
Yeah.
jail or court facilities. So. The other thing, cumulative reserve is the next one I'd like to talk about. So this is a fund, and you have a policy, a board policy that goes with this fund. And it basically predated the budget stabilization fund that you established. So it was for emergencies. But the only thing that's really going in there right now is the sales tax. The other half of the lodging sales tax is going into this fund. And then interest income on the funds. And this is the one where I was noting yesterday when we were talking about the expo and the tourism fund. It seems that lodging tax has very specific requirements to spend it on tourism. And so it just doesn't jive with the cumulative fund receiving that lodging tax because it can't be spent on the things that, other than emergency repairs for our own facilities that are tourism related. But otherwise, it's not jiving with the intent of your cumulative fund policy.
Yeah.
So it makes sense to just move, if we can, just take those sales tax dollars and push them straight to where the other lodging sales tax dollars are going, which is the tourism fund.
And we talked about this yesterday,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
Didn't we kind of make a decision to do?
So the history was that money was going into the cumulative reserve because we were paying for the Hofstad Bluffs. Reserve,
Oh.
Yeah, for those
okay.
which we
repairs.
shut down
Right.
because the repairs were going to be too expensive for the kind of revenue it was generating. So
Yeah.
we sold it off. But we never changed the
But we
cumulative
never put
reserve
back. Mhm.
policy. So it's still getting money from that tourism fund.
And we've supplanted this with I call the rainy day fund, really,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
As a cumulative
Yeah.
reserve, yeah.
So I think your suggestion yesterday, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we kind of agreed that
Yes.
we're going to move this and give some money to the,
Yeah, so,
cities
so I
and-
would like to move the money to the tourism fund, but it does have a fund balance I can going forward, I can move the revenues and make sure they go to the tourism fund. But the fund balance that it has accumulated over years. And I need to make sure you want to move the fund balance as well.
wasn't there talk yesterday about 30,000 to each city? Is that what I heard?
Yeah,
Or
that's
was
for
that a
the,
different thing?
that's for the current revenues coming in. So we have a fund balance of 500,000 in this cumulative reserve.
Oh,
Because again, it's an account where we've been very conservative on what we're budgeting for the revenue. And the revenues have exceeded the budget a number of years. So we've been budgeting in 150,000 for the revenue, and the revenue's been coming in at like $245,000 over a number of years. So
so,
there's
so this
sufficient,
can be used for capital things that are tourist related?
this can be used for people, advertising, and also it can be used for capital for our own facilities, for our own tourist
Oh,
facilities.
tourist facilities.
That's the statute, the RCW, yeah. And then our own policy set this up for this other purpose,
Yeah.
which is no longer needed.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But you're talking about changing the future.
Yes, changing the future and make the sales tax go, the lodging sales tax go to the tourism fund.
You
But
just
then what
need
do you want
us.
to do with the fund balance?
Yeah.
That's the question.
That's the question is what we want to do with the fund balance.
It's
And you're
500.
Why-
telling
why
us
don't we
we
call
have
it-
opportunities.
Why don't we call it a tourism capital reserve fund?
Yeah, we probably could do
Just
that.
hang
It's-
it
it
there,
goes to
because we
capital.
did talk a little bit yesterday. We know we're gonna have to
Retaining it.
take down a couple buildings at the fairgrounds
Mhm.
if the hotel comes in, and we may need to relocate and replace
Yeah.
that. So I agree with
So keep the
Commissioner
fund.
Weber. I
keep
don't
the
have any
fund
trouble
and
with that,
Maybe rename it and keep the fund balance.
but I don't think we
Yeah.
need to add any more to it, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
All right, Commissioner
Okay.
Mortensen, you
I'm
hear
fine
all
with
that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. All right, the next one is shooting range. And I think these are a holdover from when they were building the shooting range. And I really don't think they should be in the finance department. So, I'm gonna ask for a recommendation in this budget to change the department they're associated with and move it
Parks.
to Public Works or
Parks,
Parks.
Parks, I think, yeah, does
they're
that.
doing Parks is doing the maintenance on it already, so. That makes sense to me. Unless we want to give it all to the sheriff, make him do the maintenance.
Okay.
I think Parks, I think, is a good home for all of those. There's that lead abatement one too,
Right.
but again, they're gonna be running it, that's the department that needs to be aware of that.
Yeah, so that's okay. I mean, they're not bringing in significant, they're bringing in some revenues, but we are supporting this fund from the general fund. You realize about $75,000 a year is going into this fund from the general fund to help support the shooting range phase one. So their budget's about 200,000 a year. So anyway, yeah, and then the abatement has some money, some fund balance, but not a lot. It's about 100,000.
I think that 70,000 is that money for the maintenance for the parks to,
Okay,
I think that's where that comes from, because we hadn't been.
okay, if there's no more questions, the next one is industrial accident. This is basically your workers' comp fund. And this is where we bill the departments. And then we turn around and use those funds for claims, for active claims, for excess insurance. And basically, that fund, we're going to be looking at about the same amount of expenditures going forward. We actually took the budget down just slightly because our expenses have been running lower on our active claims, which is good. So it's about a $500,000 budget.
So how is risk management connected to this fund? It would seem to me this is one that would be a risk management fund.
It's risk management, but because there isn't, I'm overseeing that.
Okay,
That's what's on my sheet.
all right.
The next one is unemployment. This one is traditionally has not been a very large expenditure for the county. And then we turn around and bill the departments the following year. We have to get their claims in and then they're billed at a later date. There's a lag. The reason why the budget's going up for the next year on the unemployment is because we actually have had, this past year, we've had pretty high claims. We had, I believe, I'm not sure, I don't know if it was the coroner's office or I think it was the coroner's office that we had a pretty significant turnover and they filed unemployment. So, but it is a fund, self-supporting and, we build the departments and we recoup the money and then we pay those expenses, to to LNI.
It's sort of self-supporting.
Yeah.
General fund departments pay for.
Yeah,
it.
general fund probably pays a very significant portion of it. When I look at it,
But this
it's
is a
about
way,
50-50.
this is one way to share expenses with the road tax fund. 'Cause
Yes.
that's, you know, they have employees over there, so
Yeah,
Right.
it's appropriate to treat it as that kind of a fund.
And then we've talked a lot about the risk management budget. And it's significant and it's significant in what's being charged from our risk pool. And those costs have gone up steadily up every year. And, but then again, it's a, internal department that we're charging all of our departments for those expenses. And so they're seeing the effects of that on their,
they're all seeing the effects of
So,
that.
so Arn, our risk pool keeps telling us to settle these claims. And then they turn around and raise our rates because we're settling claims.
yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's like, oh.
yeah. So anyway, so it's a self-balancing fund and we charge the departments and we pay the expenses. So it's not really much I can go over on that other than that.
yeah, that,
And all that money we've been making by not having a director is gonna go away pretty soon, right? In
Yes,
about 2 weeks.
yes, October 16th. We'll have a new person starting.
So if we go to your office, October 16th has a big star and a red letter.
Yeah, and I had to have a party in a box.
you realize you gotta stay here as long as I'm here, right?
Yeah. So that concludes my, my areas, budgets and, so we're moving forward. Next session is our technology session. And so you heard about one item that will be on the list, which has to do with the,
The security.
courts, security. Not that many items, just a few.
Now that begs the question to me, because we've heard some of these other things that could be, these other funds we have, can some of that come out of that?
Possibly,
It's
but
just,
that
just
one
a, just a
is-
question.
Yeah, that one, the majority of the bill on that one is being paid by a grant, but he did have a 40% match.
Yeah,
So,
if we have those funds
yeah, that,
already built up, I mean, that's just a thought.
I think it would be appropriate so long as the RC, it fits within the RCW. And I'm going to be doing some double checking on that.
That's
Okay.
good.
So technology is our next one next week. And then following that, we'll have personnel request and you'll have a spreadsheet. Our clerk's office was unable to attend the personnel session that we have the date for. So she's going to come in separately next week and present her request and only her department's request in order to accommodate her schedule.
And we still have public services to go through.
Yes.
Okay.
You have your 5-year capital improvement project plan, you have your 6-year road plan, and you also have your equipment revolving plan. Those 3 are all slated together for, I think, the 25th, October 25th.
But we didn't, remember we ran out of time last week on Monday. We never did go through the details for that. all
Yeah,
those departments.
so I think Mike has agreed that he can go over his any details you have or questions you have for road fund, public works during his session on the 25th.
You let them know that we increased parks.
Yeah, I'll let them know. But anyway, so So we've got a very full agenda for the next 3 weeks. And I think one of the dates Kelly and I talked about, and we're going to switch it from being the October 11th to being October 10th. Because your session that day is at 5:30. And so we're going to move it to the commissioners' conference time instead of the workshop time. So if that's okay.
Starting Monday, I'm on jury duty for 2 weeks, so I'll have to trust my colleagues.
So you may or you won't be here.
Don't know.
Yeah.
I have no
But-
idea.
And
Depends if they pick him.
Ends if they pick me.
Right, right. Okay,
Okay,
anything else?
as usual, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna keep tweaking these, the formats of this, like this. I think that's a good suggestion about putting the fund balance,
So
particularly on the, you won't see fund balance on everything because if it's a general fund, it won't have a fund balance. But on individual funds, you'll see the fund balance.
that Commissioner Weber was asking for, yeah.
Yep.
So, and I'm assuming she's gonna come and get these.
Yeah, we're gonna take those.
Okay.
Because we want, because I don't think we put in yet, nope, we haven't, I can tell by the numbers. We have a tab for IT, which is
Yeah,
15.
we're gonna be able to do arm curls by the time you're done with that
Yep.
thing.
Is that arm or arm curls?
Arm curls.
I was figured wrapping me up.
Unless I hear anything else, I think we're adjourned.
All right.
Thank you.
See you
Thank you.
later.